Welcome, I'm Rose Martin, and we are right around the corner in Blacksburg, Virginia, on the beautiful Virginia Tech campus with a living legend, an American icon, a scholar, a poet, one of Oprah's 25 living legends. She's a celebrated writer, she's a space enthusiast, and she has a wicked sense of humor. Of course, we're here with Nikki Giovanni. Nikki, thank you so much for being on right around the corner.
I'm delighted to be here.
And we have to know who this wonderful little friend is.
Oh, I don't. She doesn't have good sense. This is my dog. This is Cleo, and so it's snowing today. It's supposed to snow today, and she would be unhappy to be left at home, which is why she's.
Well, we love having her. We
Well,
love
thank
having her
you.
here in the shot.
Because the dog doesn't have good sense, so I'm hoping that she's a Yorkie. If somebody wonders what, everybody that has a Yorkie out there knows they don't have good sense.
Right. Well,
they run the world.
She has a whole new fan club right now. So when we think about, young Nikki Giovanni, I'm so inspired by the fortitude and grace that you had to, grow up in a situation that wasn't easy, and then live with your grandma, and then just decide, you know what, I have got it within me to make something amazing happen. That's just so inspiring.
Well, thank you. I don't think of it that way. My father's crazy, and that was difficult, and I was lucky to have a grandmother. I think grandmothers are just the best things on earth. And I went down because she's in Tennessee, and lived with grandmother and grandpapa, and went on to college. And I actually don't have, I'm not friendly, and I don't have any talent. So if you put the two together, I'm a writer.
Well, I don't know. You seem pretty friendly, and I would say you are very talented, Miss Nikki Giovanni. So when we think about, you had early entrance to Fisker, which meant that you didn't have to finish high school, right?
I didn't finish high school, which is how I got my first job. Because, you fill out the information, and they say, when did you graduate from high school? And I had to look at the guy who was doing that. I didn't graduate from high school, and I gotta hire her. She's a high school dropout. That's how I got my first job.
Wow.
That's the truth. Yeah.
So, but when you were at Fisker, you actually decided that you wanted to go home for Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah, the dean.
And they weren't so happy about that.
The dean. I saw her a couple of years ago. Just one of those stupid rules. I don't like rules, and so, and I don't like people having an opinion. So the two things, again, I didn't see why the dean is going to tell me I can't go home to see my grandparents. I mean, what business of it is hers? I could see why she could say, okay, we don't want you to go out in a bar or something, because I didn't drink and I wouldn't have done that. But I went home to see my grandparents at Thanksgiving, and actually Grandpapa died 2 months later. So it was clearly the right decision. And I think it was helpful in a way. She kicked me out of school, and these things happen, and I'm not going to do. I mean, as far as I was concerned with the dean, I didn't care. What I cared was what I did, and I went home to see my grandparents. And Grandpapa died, and that was important to me. And so I also realized, though, you have to win, and that'd be a whole nother longer discussion. But whatever you're doing in life, you're going to have to win. And I realized, okay, I have to go to college, because you laughed at me, but it's true. My sister had dimples and great skin, and she could sing and she could dance, and a lot of people around me had all kinds of talent. They were, athletically talented. Yvonne, a friend of my sister's, was tall. They called her Ave, which is French for a bird. And she could play basketball. Everybody could do something, and I couldn't sing, I couldn't dance, I couldn't do anything. So, in my opinion, I didn't have any talent. So, if you don't have any talent, you have to have an education.
When I remember reading somewhere that you had said, oh, my sister Gary will do that, or my sister Gary, she can do that too.
Well, they used to ask, I'm the baby sister, and they'd say, Nikki, can you read? No, but Gary can. Well, Nikki, can you dance? No, but Gary can. And I spent most of my life. She's passed. Gary's been dead now 13 years. Mommy died in July, and Gary died that August. So they died within less than a month. I think they're sitting up and having, drinking beer and watching me.
And talking about the beer story, you really went to extraordinary lengths in order to not be a beer drinker. This is a great story.
Well, my cousin Allison, Mommy and Anto, we call her Anto. Mommy was born on January the 5th. Anto was born on January the 6th. And so they both died within a couple of months, actually, of each other. So Allison and I thought, okay, we have to do something to celebrate our mothers. So we do. She was in Hawaii just this year. And so we call each other on the 5th and the 6th, and we keep saying we're going to have a beer. But neither Allison nor I like beer. And so the first time we did it was, oh, we're going to go, we'll have a beer for our mothers. And then we realized, So we kind of lied and said, yeah, I had a beer, but we actually had champagne. So we finally admitted that it was champagne. And I said to Allison, you know, if we're going to have a beer, we ought to have a great beer. And that's just what we should do. We should have a great beer. She said, you're right, we should have a great beer. And so we went, my dog Wendy was alive then. And so Wendy and I went to B&N to see, there's a beer book there. But what I wanted to know was, what's the #1 beer? And the #1 beer is Utopia, which is how we ended up with the title of the book.
And I never knew that. I never knew the #1 beer was Utopia.
Utopia, chasing, and that's how we ended up chasing Utopia. But Utopia is only out every other year. This is 2019 that you and I are talking. So Utopia is out this year. Was not out last year. And it's a Sam Adams. So, you know, it's one of those, like I called Keith, who was our, we have a wine place
I know
here.
Keith, yeah.
Oh, okay. So I called Keith and I said, you know, would you just put a Utopia away from me? I knew it was going to be expensive, but I said, it's fine. He said, we don't sell Utopia. And you know how you talk to people slowly because you think somebody. I said, no, Keith, I know it's expensive because actually Utopia is $250 a quart. And I said, no, Keith, it's okay. And he said, we don't sell Utopia. I said, Keith, I just want you, Nikki, we don't. I said, okay. Why don't you? He said, they won't let us sell it. And so then it became, there's a place in California called Bounty Hunter, and Bounty Hunter sells everything. So I called Bounty Hunter, and we've been friends. I hired Giovanni in Virginia, you know. I like a Utopia. They said, we are a wine. I mean, that was like, you could hear that tone. We are a wine store. We do not sell beer. And it's like, oh, sorry, really, really sorry. And it's February, so I'm on tour. And so every place I go, I'm asking about, you know, why can't I find Utopia? I think they finally got tired
and you're
of
not
me
giving
asking
up.
about it. Oh, no, I wasn't going to give up. I was at I spoke at the CIA, which was really a wonderful thing, but the CIA knows everything, and I know they know everything. So I said to Panetta, who was the head then, I said, I'm just looking for a Utopia. And he said, look deep within yourself.
Oh.
And I know, okay, we're not.
You don't get it.
Yeah, you don't get it. So I was going up to Boston, and I was complaining that I don't know why I couldn't find Utopia. So I finally get a call because it's a Sam Adams beer. And he said, tell Dr. Giovanni we are sending her a beer, because he'd been hearing about it all over.
For months.
And the glasses to drink it out of, because you drink it out of those glasses. It's really not a beer. It's thicker. You know, you don't chew it, but it's thicker. So he sent it down to me, and so now I had Utopia. And I said to Pat, why don't you come? Now we're laughing. We call Allison Pat. I said to Pat, why don't you come over? She said, why don't you bring it out to California? I said, because if I come out, she lives in California. I said, if I come out to California, TSA will take it, to tell you the
And
truth.
what I've gone through, this beer is not leaving.
We'd never have. I said, I can't do that. And I have a dear friend, Kwame Alexander, and I said to Kwame, you know, I got to find somebody to drink this with. He said, why don't you come on with me? We're going to Ghana. Well, I can't take it any place, but I went to Ghana, and Queen Juanita is there. And we were talking. She said, oh, you know, I'd love to taste it. You know, why don't you bring it? I said, ma'am, they won't let me bring it out of the United States. Why don't you, I'll meet you, you know, why don't you come to the States sometime? And she said, oh, I can't come to the States. And this is where her best friend, this is her best friend lives in Barbados. And her best friend got sick. And so Queen Juanita wanted to go and see about her. Now she's in Barbados, she's only 4 hours away. So she called Kwame, because they're friends. And she said, you know, I'm only 4 hours away. I wonder if I came up, you know, if we could go over and see Nikki and drink this beer, because I'm excited. Everybody's excited about it. So he called me, and I said, my God, I've never had a queen in my house. And you talk about having to dust and polish and shine.
Let's get everything going.
Oh, my.
All for a beer.
I am a good cook, so I had a rack of lamb. You know, we had a beautiful meal, and then after the meal, we opened the Utopia, and so we drank it. Now, Queen Juanita and my friend Jenny had good sense. They had a glass of beer and went on about their business. Kwame and I were sitting there gossiping and talking. We finished it off. The last thing that I remember was laughing with him. The next morning, my head is on the table, his head is on the table. Queen Juanita is in my living room in a chair. I have a bunch of quilts with a quilt. She's asleep and Jenny's in the bed. It was like embarrassing.
Wow.
But,
and you had a chance to toast your sister and your mom.
I did.
Wow.
I really did. It's wonderful.
What a great story.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about being a cook. I also read that, that rack of lamb is one of your specialties.
Yeah.
But yet you also had an opportunity that you wanted to grill it, but there was a story with Maya Angelou with a rack of lamb, huh?
Well, see, she's gone now. But see, Maya thinks, or thought, however, whatever that verb is, thought that she was a great cook. And so she and I would fight about who can do what. And one day she called because she got tired of hearing me. I fried the best chicken, and I said that to her. She said, "No, you don't." I said, "Well, I know what I do that you can't do is I make a rack of lamb." She said, "I could do that." I said, "No, I make the best rack of lamb. I know that." And so she said, "Well, you come down." She's only 2 hours away because she was in Wake Forest, and I order my. This is not important. I get my lamb from Lobel, so. And so I ordered my Lobels, and I get in my car, and I drive down to Wake Forest. And I said to Miss, what is her, I forget her name now, her cook, I said, "I'm cooking today." And I did Maya had one of those kitchens that you have the grill, everything is there, you know, you have the fabulous kitchen. Mine is just kind of ordinary. But I used her grill on the inside, and I made it. She had some people over, and we sat down, and so Maya just looked. It was beautiful. Of course, it was just beautiful.
And it was perfectly done.
It was. And she cut it, and she said, "It could use a little salt." I said, "Girl, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. you know this is perfect." And it was.
It's perfect.
It's perfect.
And you'll know, and I'll share my recipe maybe, just maybe with you.
I got the laugh on them, so and it was perfect.
And that was quite an event when you had Tony and Maya here at Virginia Tech. What a gift to have all three of you in the same space sharing your work.
You know, Maya died shortly after. That started off, Slade died, Tony's son. And I was talking to Maya and I said, what should we do? And we said, let's have a celebration. You know, not a memorial, let's have a celebration. And of course, everybody would do anything for Maya, and a lot of people would do a lot for me. So what we did was we called all of the writers, we just got in touch with all of the writers, and said, "Why don't you come?" And we were going to have it at Wake Forest. And read your favorite Toni Morrison, and Toni will be there, you know, and it'll kind of cheer her up. But then Maya, I didn't realize it was she was transitioning, and we didn't really know it. She came up, she called me and said, "Can you come down?" I knew something was wrong. And so I drove down, and she said, "Will Virginia Tech do this?" She said, I just don't have the energy. And I said, "Tech would be delighted." Dr. Steger, whom I love so much, I said to Dr. Steger, "We just have one small problem, is how to get Toni, because Toni also has problems getting around." And he said, "Oh, we'll just send my plane." Which is
there you go.
I was going to say, which is what he did. But we had it was sold out, but the ticket, you know, it was not for sale.
Right.
And I don't have programs that are for sale. And I found out a long time ago, if you're doing something, the best thing to do is take money off the table. Because once you take money off the table, then you can have a great program. Nobody's looking for, "Well, she got $50 and you only gave me 48."
Right.
If there's no money on the table, you don't have a problem.
Yeah.
So, you know.
And that's really, it's an unusual way to approach it, but it makes it pure in a way by pulling the money off. And by the way, I was in the seats that day. I was there. It was amazing.
It was.
It was such a gift, such a gift. And I love the fact that, you know, when you talk about your process and you talk about advice to others, you know, you think, I've read somewhere that you're like, you know, I don't give people advice. I want you to follow your heart. I want you, I'm going to be straightforward with you. And I'm going to say, you know, find your lane, you know?
Yeah.
Get in there and do what you were meant to do. And don't worry about people criticizing you.
No.
And that's kind of hard though, right?
I don't think so. I mean,
Especially
all
for
anybody
kids.
can tell you is no.
Yeah.
And of course, bringing that program here to Virginia Tech was incredible. But I had a great president. I've had, actually, Dr. McComas was a great president, and Dr. Sands is a good president. We're not as close as with Dr. Steger. And bringing that kind of, if you were there, you know.
Yes.
to be able to put that on stage. And there are a couple of things I hope to get done before I retire.
I didn't want it to end. I mean, we were sitting there, I'm like, no, keep going, keep going, keep
Well,
going.
you know what Tony said, which was wonderful, when we brought her out and said, she said, if nothing ever happens in my public life again, this does it for me. And I couldn't have been more pleased, because I love Tony so much. And nothing's going to take the place of your child. He had cancer and he died. But I wanted her to know that we loved her. And Maya wanted her to know. And nobody's ever had all three of us on stage. And now that Maya has transitioned, it's not one of the possibilities. But it was wonderful. It really, and Dr. Steger was right there, like, you know, just let us know what you need. Let us know what you need.
And there was love in that room.
Oh yeah.
You know, before we get to this book, A Good Cry, another icon, and I love the story of you spotting Rosa Parks on the other side of the airport and working it out in your head that you are going to find a way to meet her.
Oh, yeah, that was too funny. That was when the old Pittsburgh airport, before they actually got a real airport. So it was like a trailer, and it was raining. So I knew that we weren't going. That was in the day of propellers, and I knew we weren't going anyplace. And I'm a nervous, and you don't know this, but I'm a nervous individual. So I always like to know where my back is. I'm a civil rights person, so you need to know where your back is. And so when I walked in the trailer, I thought, okay, let me find someplace to put my back, and I could go to sleep, and I could go to sleep talking to you.
Please don't.
And so, no, but I mean, it's a
Easy.
gift. It really is a gift. And I sat down, and then I looked over. I said, geez, you know, that woman looks like Rosa Parks. And then I looked, because I put my glasses on, I said, it's Rosa Parks. And of course, Miss Parks travels with someone, or traveled with, my verbs get mixed up. I wonder if in heaven she has someone she travels with. But Miss Parks travels with someone. And then, in all fairness, there was just a white guy sitting there. He didn't know. He was doing what he didn't have any idea he was sitting with. And I was trying to think, okay, I want to meet her now. How will I go about this? I knew that I wasn't going to be able to move the black woman. So the question is, how do you move the white guy? And I could have gone over and said, you know, one of those, excuse me, sir, you're sitting next to a cultural icon, and I'd like to have your seat if you don't mind. Or
Very politely.
Or I could say, you know, it was what we call bogarting. Or I could go over and just, you know, and he looked up, are you going to move or what? And he's, oh, I'm sorry.
And you just slid on in there. I think that's hysterical.
Yeah.
And, you know, so much of your life and your work, and I know you say you don't like to give advice, but if you were to write a poem for the younger Nikki, what kind of wisdom would you share with her?
I'd say you did a good job, you know. And I think the main thing that I like about myself is that I haven't blamed myself for something that I either did or didn't do. And I think that's important, because it keeps me from, I'm not unhappy with myself. And sure, I've made mistakes. There's a reason that pencils have erasers. And the main thing about a mistake is that you know you've done it. I was out at Salt Lake City, and I'm meeting in the morning with a school, with young kids, not the college, but high school kids. And, you know, you're meeting high school kids in Salt Lake City. So I said, and I walked out on stage, they got introduced, and they were being nice, but they were like, and I said, I know, because it's true, I said, I know you have no idea why you're here, which sort of got their attention. I said, you know, I'm just a poet, and I know that you're wondering why you have to be bothered. And they looked, I said, may I share? Because I'm brilliant. And so that got their attention. I said, you may wonder why I'm brilliant. You know, you haven't heard anything. I said, well, let me tell you why. I said, I've written some poems that were excellent. I've written some poems that were okay. And I've written some poems that were not good. And what makes me brilliant is I know the difference. And the kids,
They're on their seats then.
the kids just said, we had a good time. You have to know the difference. So that's what we were, you have to know when you've made a mistake, you have to know, and I was talking earlier about winning. Winning isn't just beating somebody down. I was wrong to get kicked out of school. That was that simple. And I'm going to lose. So the thing to do is to go back to Fisk, admit that I was wrong. How can we work this out? And when we work it out, then I go back and I graduate. And that's what
And that's such an important lesson. Recognize the mistake,
Yeah.
make amends for it, and then move on.
And go on.
And don't let it
Otherwise,
sit there
you're going
with
to be
you.
stuck with this mistake that you made
Right.
for the rest of your life. And you're angry and you're upset or whatever. And it's no point. I knew I had made a mistake. I knew I needed to go. I knew I needed to graduate. And so you do that. But I had more fun with the kids in Utah.
Oh, that's a great story. You know,
It's
your
true.
book, A Good Cry, almost had a different title.
It almost cried surveillance. It almost called
Right,
it
it's
surveillance.
almost surveillance. And that was interesting to me because what was it that changed for you, that you realized, you know, instead of surveillance, we're going to go with a good cry, because women or you just don't cry. It was hard to come to terms with those emotions of dealing with all the grief and thinking we've got to get it out.
I tell you the truth, I watch. And that's why we were dealing with surveillance at that point. I watch. It's something I've done all my life. I don't, right now as I sit here, know why I changed to a good cry. Maybe it was something in the, I really, I'm sorry to say, I just don't know. But I know that most people don't cry, women or men. And everybody thinks you do. Everybody, if you're reading or seeing some bad movie, everybody's breaking down and they're crying. And it's not true. And I had, you know, my mom and my sister died within a month of each other. And then my aunt Anto died. And then Wendy, my dog that I had mentioned, Wendy died that December. And so it was, you know, and you didn't have time to cry. What you had to do was you had to sell the house, you had to deal with the car, you had to, it was just, you had work to do. And I think that's more true of most people, that your mother or your father dies, you have things that have to be done. You don't have time to mourn. You don't have time to be sad. And I know that men, of course, are always being told, you know, be a man, don't cry. Well, men should cry, like men get breast cancer, and nobody tells them that too. And that's the truth. And men will die of breast cancer without admitting that it's breast cancer, because they don't want to say, oh, I have a breast, but they do.
They do, right.
And it's the kind of thing, so we ended up with what everybody probably needs, is a good cry.
Well, I loved it, and it was
Thank you.
such a tender portrayal in a way. And I went back and reread pieces of it because I didn't feel like I got it the first time as I'm reading the stories. And I love how the stories are intermixed with the poems that kind of give us a glimpse into Nikki. Would you be willing to read for us?
Oh, sure, I'd be delighted. The one, my favorite, sit down, and I don't mean to the exclusion of others, but one of my favorites, I married my mother. Let me see if I can find it. And that's the truth. I used to tease Mommy. But my father got sick. My father, we just didn't get along. And I thought he was, well, I didn't think that. He was abusive. And Gus had a stroke. And Mommy, I just called him, and Mommy called me. I was living in New York. And she said, you know, she called, well, he was my father. Your father's had a stroke. You know, he's in the hospital. Well, I knew she wasn't calling because I cared. So the only reason she could be calling was that she needed somebody. So I said I had a son, Thomas and Wendy. I had a dog. I had my dog. And so next morning in a Volkswagen, and we got into the car and, you know, just got, you know, and went on, and we drove on, and we were there to help take care of Mommy. He did die, of course, ultimately, and that's a longer story, but Gus died. And Mommy and I were sitting there. Mommy was a beer drinker, and I'm not. I was a coffee drinker. I didn't start to even drink wine until I came here to Tech. And we were sitting there one day on the table, and I said to Mom, you know, you should have married me. You know, it would have been different. She said, well, if I had married you, how would I have gotten you? And I said, well, I think that we need to ask somebody how we can get human egg to get out, like chicken egg gets out, like penguin egg gets out, how we can get human egg out so that we can make decisions.
And you lived together for quite a few years.
30 years.
Wow.
Yeah, we did until she passed. I out of here.
Right, when you got recruited to come here to Tech.
Yeah, and the first thing that I asked was, would you like to go to Virginia? And we're AME, African Methodist Episcopal, and she said, whether thou goest. And so we moved from Cincinnati, we moved here. But I married my mother. I know crying is a skill. I automatically wipe my eyes, even though I know crying is a skill. Maybe I will learn. My mother did when she thought I was asleep. I think my sister did sleep, but sleep is as difficult to me as crying. I laugh easily and I smile and withhold any true feelings, except once I fell in love with my 8th grade teacher and spent most of my life trying to feel safe again, though maybe I'm safe now, after almost 30 years, which is as long as I lived with my mother. Maybe that's not a poem. Maybe that's something else. Maybe I just wanted to show my father that he needn't be cruel. Maybe I just enjoy buying the house he had to live in, showing her she should have married me instead of him. Or maybe, since we will all soon be gone, I should be happy I found my mother in someone else who loves me. What else really matters? I like that.
I do too.
I like the paperback, by the way, and I shouldn't even mention this. We had, Rachel and I had a discussion. Rachel is my editor. And the hardcover has what is a traditional, Giovanni was born in 43 and this is what she did, yakety yak. But on the paperback, and I said to Rachel, I'm tired of, who doesn't know when you're born? I mean, these are things you can look up. So I wrote the fantasy.
Oh.
This is my fantasy.
Okay, and what is your fantasy?
A long time ago, a little girl sat in the window of her bedroom she shared with her older sister and read by a finger flashlight. She looked at the stars when the battery gave way. And when she got older, she snuggled under her grandmother's quilts to listen to jazz on the radio all night, or at least until she fell asleep. She first fell in love with words, then they somehow seemed to fall in love with her. She got to learn history, meet people, travel everywhere, and since this is a fairy tale, she lives happily ever after. There may be other things along the way, but the words and the stars and the music are all that matters.
Oh, how beautiful. And that little girl has transformed into an amazing woman and an American legend, icon, all of those words that I used to describe you. Nikki, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I'm so very grateful.
It's my
Special
pleasure.
thanks to Nikki Giovanni right here in her office on the campus of Virginia Tech for having us into her office and sharing her life and her work with us. I want to thank you for tuning in. Please tell your friends about us, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time right around the corner.
Production funding for Right Around the Corner provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Anne Ray Foundation, and by viewers like you. Thank you.